Preparing the live stream. Good. So these things tend to happen any time, Lucy. So we'll find out how we're getting on. Oh, here we go. We're in. Great. Well, hi. This meeting's been live streamed. Got it. Did you get that your end?
I've got it my end. Yes, I can.
Oh,
see
good.
that.
All right, brilliant.
We are live.
Hi, Lucy.
Hello.
Hi, and hi everybody. Back after a little break with some more Facebook Lives. So got the wonderful Lucy Aalders today. Now, just to let you all know, Lucy and I go back a bit, and we're good chums, and we live really close geographically, so we get to see each other in person, which is amazing. So we've known each other a while, and we've been going through this little journey into thinking more about emotionality and emotional drive, and about individuality from the dog and processing and all these kind of things. And we've very much gone on it together, and it's been great. And we've had some amazing conversations along the way, and it's great to be able to share today with you. So thanks for joining us, Lucy.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Tell us a little bit about you then, just before we start. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do.
About my background and what I do. Okay, so where to start? So currently I am recognised as a behaviourist and a trainer with dogs. I haven't always done that. I've done this for it's probably 11 years now. And previous to that, I worked in special needs education for a few years, working with young adults and teenagers with autism and learning disabilities. And also I then was a pub landlady for a while, which is actually where I got my dog in adult life, which is where my journey in dogs actually began. That was Tiggy. So she led me down the path of, I didn't quite understand her behaviour and started to have some issues. And so I sought out for professional advice, and I had a mixture of experiences, none of which were very helpful. And I ended up with a very stressed, unhappy dog, and very confused myself, mainly because some of the methods and things I was being taught I didn't really feel comfortable with, and it certainly didn't look like my dog was comfortable with them either. And it was a lot of it was naivety, lack of understanding, and the professionals I was being pointed to used a certain way that I perhaps wouldn't agree with, certainly now anyway. So that was when I kind of thought I really need to learn this stuff myself, and I was already a bit itchy to change what I was doing. So I went and put myself on a 2-day dog psychology course, and that's where I suddenly went, wow, this stuff's amazing, and I feel like I can really get this kind of thing, and I really want to learn more. And actually I'm really passionate about helping others, because I had some really terrible experiences and I felt awful about my dog and how I had treated her based on what other people told me to do. So I then took out a loan, set up my own dog walking business, and carried on my education, which at the time it was Steve Mann, before the IMDT, that I had gone on the 2-day course with. And so I thought best way to learn is to be around dogs. So I've got my dog walking business. I kept starting to do more courses, and then the IMDT came about, and I kind of just followed that route through the IMDT, become a dog trainer. So that's kind of where I started, and it's been a pretty good fun journey. I've moved a few times. I've worked abroad in Spain, and at the time when I started I was in Brighton, and I'm now based down in Exeter. I've been down here for 7 years now, and I have my own business running puppy classes, doing one-to-ones, doing behaviour work, so kind of a large spectrum of stuff, all age groups, and I run that with Howard, my partner, who's been doing that with me for about 4 years. Yeah, that's the nutshell.
I think it's really interesting how many trainers, or animal professionals more generally, come into things through their own dog.
Yeah,
because we're seeking some kind of support or solution or whatever it is, and then and especially then when we go into a situation where I suppose sometimes you can meet somebody who helps you with your dog, you get inspired by them, but that's not as common as, oh God, I had a really bad experience with them, there's got to be something better, there's got to be something different, and we end up seeking that knowledge ourselves.
Definitely. I think there's I mean, certainly for me, unfortunately, Tiggy's story didn't really end very well. And I'm convinced that had that early sort of 12 months of me building that relationship, she was a rescue dog and she was in her teens at that time. So she was about 15 months old when she came to me. I was in my early 20s. I really didn't have an idea. I've grown up with dogs my whole life, been around them, but let's face it, loads of us grew up in households where the rolled up newspaper was the best way to tell your dog what not to do. So I just love dogs. I was that kid who wanted to squeeze them till their eyes popped out. And I was trying to do the best I can. And also I think you live in a culture where you don't question authority, certainly for me. You know, at school, at home, it was very much you listen and you're told and you respect your elders, or you respect the person in the authoritative position. And that's really hard when you go to somebody who is a professional. But I guess you have to have enough kind of strength and understanding to be able to go, I'm not comfortable. Is there another route? Can I question this, and can I look somewhere else? And actually, had I started my relationship with Tiggy in a more positive way, with better understanding, and perhaps somebody who used methods that were more understanding of her development stage, rather than just trying to fix her behavior in a quick, sharp, short, authoritative way, being very diplomatic, it may have been different. And what actually happened is about 3 months into running my own dog training business, and I was signed up to another course, and I was reading every book I could find. Social media wasn't really much of a thing at that point. I don't really remember. Tiggy was now with a group of dogs because she had issues around dogs. She was muzzled because I wasn't sure of some of her intentions, and she was off lead a lot more. And unfortunately, it was about 4 days before Christmas, and everyone was on Christmas holidays, but there was one dog that I'd still offered to walk, and I offered to walk him near his home, and Tiggy was good friends with him, but she still didn't quite trust me 100%. So her recall and her age, probably included in that, meant that she wasn't the most reliable dog to call, and I had a lot less understanding than I have now. And I remember this one moment where it's getting dark, it's about 4:30 on a winter afternoon. I've got the other dog with me, he's 10, he's a Ridgeback. We're walking away and we're in a copse that is near his house. I don't know it. And I call her and I look back and she sort of gives me that look that goes, I will come, but there's a rabbit or something in those trees, and it's just more motivating. Anyway, 2 hours later, I find out from a police officer what happened. But about 11 minutes later, Tiggy had run through the woods, crossed a road, hit a motorway, and was killed. And that's probably one of the hardest things anyone has to go through. And the amount of why did that happen? How did it happen? What did I do wrong? All of those things. And I really think when I know what I know now, the foundations of that relationship didn't start off very well. So for her to have the trust in the relationship and the communication that I was hoping for in that situation, it wasn't there. It could have been there 6 months later because I was learning more stuff. And I just thought, I don't want anyone else to go through that. So that's, I think, where my passion and my drive has come from my dog experience, to start really trying to help others not to go through that experience as best as I can.
I think that's, that just shows a huge strength in your outlook, because I know for other professionals that kind of experience would be enough to kind of think, I can't do this, this is not going to be, because it can be a very difficult experience to go through and it's a lot to process.
I definitely felt that at the time. There was a lot of questioning for a long time. It was and I think even now there's still part of me, which is probably what helps us keep yearning to learn more. I think if anything now, my within my daily phrasing and talking to people, the words I don't know for sure seem to be more and more frequent than ever before, because I feel like the more I learn, the more there is to learn. And there's that seeking to find out and to figure out and to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I guess, yeah, but definitely questioning, why am I doing this? I can't do this. Look what I've done.
What I want us to have a think about today, Lucy, is one of the things that I've tried to do with this new series of talks. We've got some great people coming up, and I've tried to have some who are professionals like yourself who have made a shift from a very kind of more traditional training model, coming into one which is more about learning from the dog and thinking about how we set the dogs up to have better recovery, go through a self-regulatory process, and especially how we recognize that and support that in puppies and adolescents. So that people listening in, especially other trainers who are thinking about making some of these shifts, they can hear professionals who have already gone down that journey, like yourself and Howard. So a little bit later on in the talk, we'll kind of catch up with ourselves a little bit, and then we can start thinking about some of the practical application stuff. But if we start off with your early experiences then, when you first came into training, when you were doing the more structured, I don't know if obedience is the right word, but you know, that kind of more functional training, when you were training that, did that process, even then, was there something niggling you in the background thinking there's got to be a bit more to this, or was there a period of time where that felt right for you, where you felt quite content working in those ways?
So it's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because I think I want to be able to say, no, there was something niggling then, but I do think there was a period of time where I was just enamored and in love with the idea of, and really bought into the building a relationship with your dog, building confidence through trick training, you know, teaching your dog to spin and twist and jump through hoops. It felt exciting. It felt a bit pizzazz, a bit glittery. And I was surrounded by lots of people doing the same thing. It seemed like it was the camp I was in, so I probably didn't see a lot of outside stuff. And actually, when I look back, some of the comparisons of what I did with my own dog and some of the training I did, I was still dog walking alongside that. And I do remember being out with a pack of dogs on a walk and observing their behavior in a group without interfering. That was really interesting, and that definitely raised questions for me compared to the training of things, the sits, the downs, the stays, the recall, because when you watch them hang out together, that social experience, the dynamic, the way they follow pathways and how the space moves, and the way you could keep walking and the ones that were stopped behind sniffing would still continue to follow you and know the route. And, you know, so there were probably questions there, but I think I got caught in the flashy lights for a little while. And I really loved it. And I wasn't, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because I can think of times when I was a child and the concept of SeaWorld was amazing. Wow, look at what they can do. Those trainers must have the best job in the world. And then actually, when we know the reality of SeaWorld, it's devastating. It's awful. And now I look back at all those things and I think about some of the early classes I did, and the struggles that some of the people had, and watching other people do a lot of the traditional training. And it wasn't bad, it wasn't scary. A lot of it was very, very food-based and lots of repetition to get the learning in, you know, sit down, stay, twist, spin, hand touches, all of those things. And it looked successful. But what I was noticing was that the level of movement and the level of activity, the level of stimulation, and actually for some dogs that just became too much, and it became too much for the owners. And I think there were questions for sure of, why are we doing this? When does my dog sit anyway? Because it's not always because I've taught her, because, you know, we don't teach our children to use their own legs and arms. They learn it through development and growth, and we might encourage, we might help, but it's more natural. And it's watching that toddler finally learn to hold something and pull themselves up, and they do it a few times and that muscle memory builds. Why are we coercing with food, which is a primary resource, to do things that, do we need them? Are they natural? What happened to just stillness and calmness? When I cross the road, do I need the dog to sit, or just need the dog to stop their paws moving at the edge of the road when I stop my feet moving at the edge of the road? So we're in unison with our movement. And I think those things started to be there, but sorry, that's a waffly answer, isn't it? But yeah, I think it was hard because I went down a route of education that I really was so inspired by, and I still think it's fantastic. I just feel it has a place, and it's a much smaller place than I've ever felt it was. And I do feel we have to understand it and the mechanics of training 100%, because there may be situations that it can be helpful. But we've got to remember that we're asking an animal to live in our human world. And so there are levels of unnatural about that, just from the simple fact that you've got an animal living with a human in a house, if that's not too controversial.
No, and I think you've given some little glimpses of some stuff we're going to unpack in a little bit, because that's obviously the place where we're at now, thinking about, rethinking about these things. And I think for me, there is a big difference between structured educational learning and experimental kind of environmental learning. And especially for caregivers, they just tend to think of training being a structured learning experience. They're not so aware of what their dogs are learning in that experimental, environmental, connective way. And I think, and of course, a lot of traditional training that has quite an operant bias around these things will focus on that structured learning. And these discussions aren't about dismissing structured learning, because there's a lot of stuff, we've got Molly, our puppy here. I'm going to be sharing Molly's journey now that we've finally officially adopted her in the group, and some videos and that as we go through. But there are things that I need her to know, and that's the thing about building that vocabulary up and building up a connection. But there is way more that she's going to learn herself through her own ability to connect and process, and it's giving her that safe space in order to do that, but mainly an awareness from the caregiver. And I know that's something that you and Howard have developed with your classes, so we'll come on to that a bit. So just going back a step, so what I've heard from a lot of people, a lot of fellow trainers, is that actually they started to see the shift in how they responded with their own dogs. And I know, I remember a few years ago, my husband Kieran said to a dog that we had with us at the time, saying, "Oh, all the things I hear you say on the phone to your clients, we're not doing any of that." And I thought, yeah, you're right. Why am I not doing that? Why am I doing something different? And that's really started to make me think more about what I'm doing with my own dog, which is not so much about a task orientated, got to do this, got to do that, do this by next Tuesday sort of thing. Is that something that mirrors your journey through, or were there other events that really got you thinking? What were those things that started to shift that view?
I think definitely there are things. There's almost a kind of worrying about the expectation of how your dogs will behave when other people see them, because you're the trainer, so you must have the best behaved dogs ever. And I was very relaxed. I tried crate training. She didn't like it. I didn't carry on with it. She likes to sit and try and look at me cutely when eating something, and I will admit occasionally I've shared a crisp with her, and I don't mind, because when I turn around to her and I say, "That's not yours," she goes, "Oh, okay then." So I think I noticed I had a more natural way. I practiced the stuff, the training, because I wanted to learn how to do it in order to teach others. So, she sort of became my practice partner, if you like. And certainly with other dogs I've been with, it was, looking after my mum's dog, who, she was a classic nutty collie, and just trying to see the world from her traits, from who she was, and trying to follow that and understand how to, I think it definitely does come a little bit from looking at how you do things and the things you're not bothered by. I'm not bothered if my dog does that. I don't need her to sit. She doesn't like sitting. I want her to be relaxed and happy and calm. I noticed with her particularly that when I did training with food, for her, there were some things that actually I think have been detrimental, with too much obsession with food, too much arousal with food. And particularly the early advice I got around teaching separation distress issues was a lot of reliance on food initially, the advice I was given back at the time. And now it's like her anxious go-to. So I saw those negative effects, but I think it was observing people in classes, the dogs that would jump excitedly and still nip their owners, and you're sort of thinking, this isn't changing. It doesn't matter how many repetitions they do or how quickly they deliver the food, the arousal was still there. And I'm asking myself, what was the stimulus? What was creating that fizziness? And what did I want the dogs to be doing naturally? Why was I teaching outside instead of inside? Because it was more natural. There was more space. So why were we trying to create unnatural circumstances when they could just be left to use their noses and watch the world? I don't know if that answered your question, Andy. That went on a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's yeah, it's a hard one. I think we're always at work to some degree, aren't we? You come home to your dogs and you think about the dogs you've just been with and the people you've just been with, and you assess what you've just done with your dog. And you're right, I didn't necessarily practice all the things I did. I didn't mind about them. I didn't have a 50 kilo whatever pulling on the end of a lead, so I didn't have the same problems that some of my clients were facing. But I also had a more relaxed, natural way of being within the home. It didn't matter if my dog had 3 beds and 2 water bowls. That's what I wanted for her. I gave her as much choice as possible. So yeah, there's all sorts of variables in there that you're just questioning things all the time, and you're questioning because I think you want to learn, and there isn't one size fits all. So there's definitely some puppies over the years that seem to have just gone, yeah, you can do all this training with me. I respond really well. I'm really calm. I take it on board, and I can still engage with everyday life and process everything in a natural way. And that puppy can just handle that. But there was lots of pups that it just wasn't working. And you start to see the dogs who are walking nicely on a lead, who all they do is look up at their owners, and their owners are reliant on their hands here, and they don't know how to move beyond that. And I'm waiting for the moment where that little ensemble hits a lamppost. So
metaphorically and physically.
Yes.
And I think this is the thing, isn't it? I think that the reason I'm interested to hear different people's stories about these things is because I think when we come in when we have quite a lot of us start our education with a big heavy emphasis on learning theory. And like you say, a lot of the training stuff, oh my god, this is really cool. If I do this, the dog will do that. Oh my god, this is really great. And I see it like there's some kind of creaky old rusty door in the corner that we just out of kind of just in mind's view, but just out of eyesight, if you know what I mean. And then one day we see it and we just open it a little bit, and then it sends us on this path of really thinking about things a lot differently. And it's just really interesting to hear different people's stories about how they actually thought, hang on, maybe there is something different here, because we can get stuck in the task orientated side of our work. And it takes a bit to break away from that sometimes.
It does. And I do think there's been a couple of things over the years that stick in my mind, and it will have been conversations with people. So I've met people over the years who, you know, they said, I never did any training, I never went to puppy classes, and, you know, we just do this, and their dog always follows them, comes back, you know, they just have a relationship, and they nurtured them calmly through adolescence till they matured. They didn't give them complete freedom irresponsibly in adolescence if the dog wasn't able to cope with it. They managed the dog when the dog needed to chew or the dog needed to dig, and it was just a very natural way of being. And I often used to look at street dogs, which we don't have a lot of in this country, but you know, you'll see the homeless person with the dog under a blanket next to them, not on a lead, and who knows what happens in a day for that dog, but that dog is always there with that owner. They're not sat there doing sit down, stay, come or training. They just have a relationship, and that bond seems to be the thing that carries through. And it brings me back to thinking about the programs I loved as a kid. The Littlest Hobo, he never had a lead, no one trained him to do anything, and he was always getting the humans out of trouble for the silly things that they did, you know. And that makes me go, where have we got so sidetracked that we feel that we've suddenly got these wonderful tools to suddenly understand and sort of fix dogs and make them do exactly what we want. And that even that word make is like, we fell off the track here. We had some wonderful relationships for thousands of years, and we've gone a bit far that way. And where has it come from? It's not come from the dogs. It's come from society and the expectations. And then, you know, what we can make look glittery and cool, and it's not necessarily reality. And I'm not saying that it's wrong at all. And I'm just saying we need to have a broader view. We perhaps need to look at those that came before us, you know, thousands of years ago, not just 20 years ago, and also that what are we trying to achieve? If we're looking for a relationship to share as a family member within our homes, are we looking for manipulation, coercion? What do we base our relationships on, and do we need all of this stuff? Is it making things more complicated?
I think they're really important questions, and I think the answer to that last bit is potentially yes, especially for some of the caregivers that I work with who are part of the expectations they've built up from their dog is because of all the things that we're told we have to do, and what a well-behaved dog looks like and what that's supposed to mean. When you started to think about some of these things a little bit more, did you find a connection back to your time working with the special needs children, when you think back to how, the conformality and the conformality of education had to be shifted in those environments to cater more for the individuality of the child and their care needs? Did you make a connection through with thinking about dogs?
I think definitely there's been some level of connection, and I think some of that may also have been just certain people I've sort of read or looked into. So Temple Grandin, for instance, she works with animals but is also autistic, and but certainly there was a book that I revisited that I had when I was teaching, which is called I think it's called Knowing Me, Knowing You. And it was a type of working with people with autism called intensive interaction. And there was this one student whose name I won't mention, obviously, but who I was assigned to work one-to-one with. And he was non-verbal, but he made a lot of noises and sounds and movements. But he was very withdrawn from interacting with anybody. And as he got a bit older, it kind of got a bit worse. So we would have these intensive interaction sessions. And the sort of premise of this philosophy or methodology, whatever you want to call it, was that I would echo some of the things he did in order to communicate. So, for instance, if he did this to his face, I would just do the same and then just wait. And anything he did, I'd sort of just echo it, and not in an irritable, stare at, trying to copy someone. I would just subtly, you'd sort of having like a, very quiet conversation, just echoing somebody's body language, I guess. And what started to happen, I remember this so clearly, is this smile kind of built on his face, and I got these sideways looks, and he started to test me to see if I was playing interaction with him. So he started to do things really purposefully and look at me. And then he would look around and he would pick something up that wasn't near me. So I would have to reach across to pick up that thing. And I remember at some point within, 4 or 5 sessions, it built and it built and it built. And there's this moment where he let out this lovely sound, and I wish I could replicate it, because it was like a sort of a Scooby kind of with a big grin. And he reached across and he put his hand on my hand. And we just sat there for a few moments. And it was that moment that I then started to be able to really interact with him. So he would do things where he'd want to hold my hand and get me to move with him. And that reminds me a lot of working with dogs, that concept of just being and sort of mirroring, echoing. We do it naturally with our own species. When you there's lots of people you meet who accidentally pick up other people's accents, and it can be kind of annoying for ourselves or for the other person, but there's an element of trying to familiarize and build relationship, and we echo each other's body language. That concept of if you smile at the world smiles back at you. So I think certainly some of those things, and the concept of time, that time was one of the most valuable qualities of the work we did. I had another student I was assigned to one-to-one, and it was 6 months before he said my name. And I remember that day so clearly, because it felt like the biggest reward for the time I had given to allow him to trust me. And that meant I stepped back from my needs, my wants, my intentions, I want to squeeze the puppy till its eyes pop out kind of. I had to let him communicate with me when he was ready. And I do think that's really valuable now at this stage. And a lot of it is also us staying calm, being still, just being.
I think there's huge connections there, isn't there? Because one of the things that you and I have spoken about before is about trying to allow ourselves to be available to the emotional care needs of the dog, to be available to their truth. And that is about slowing down. It is about what the example you gave there, beautiful example, where you were trying to find ways to connect in a way that was authentic for them. Because I think one thing that we can risk with, especially our training toolkit, is thinking, right, I need you to do this now. This is how I need you to be able to communicate, rather than just slowing things down and saying, okay, what are you doing now? How are you communicating? And I know a lot of people who I speak to, they do draw back on their time as a teacher or working in education or working in care. And there's a lot of things that you suddenly start to join there, and you think, yeah, I can see that, because the principles are the same, I think. And it comes back to this divide between having a task-oriented approach or a care-oriented approach. And it can be very easy, especially when we feel under pressure to deliver. We've taken money, right, and we have to deliver, we have to do something, that we can flip into a task-oriented approach. But the care-oriented side of things, we have to get some investment from us first, right, regarding time. And it's something you've spoken about quite a lot to me, about the gift of slowing things down. So tell us more about that, and how you kind of really, because that's very central to your ideology and philosophy now with Howard, isn't it? About what you do in classes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is central to everything, actually. Our sort of general motto is slow down, do less, and settle. And part of that is we are teaching the caregivers to slow themselves down, to have their own self-regulation, because let's face it, it can be very emotive working with your own dog. We're very emotionally attached, and if you have a dog who's struggling in an environment, that can be stressful. And it's I want to kind of put out there social reference and social inference. In the same way, if I was to suddenly, point up, and we're in the same room together, there's an urge in you that wants to look up to see what I'm pointing at, and there's an inference and a reference there that how to behave amongst others, and in reference to what they're doing, of what's happening around us. And I think often we are so much focusing on the dogs and our busy lives that we have become so much less aware of what we are doing and how that may be influencing outwardly. So there's this element of slowing down, one, because everything slower makes everybody slower. If people mooch in the Sunday afternoon sun, you can see it sort of rubs off. Christmas shopping's a great example. Everybody's rushing around and everybody feels like this, and it's like we're all kind of rubbing off against each other according to how each other's behaving. So I think there's that element of, if we can slow down, how does it help everyone around us, whoever that may be, to slow down as well? But also that learning of self-regulation. What is your heart rate doing? How is your body moving? And teaching us to be more mindful in ourselves in order to give calm cues about what's happening around us. Perhaps even to have more time to observe and have an experience. I don't look at going for a walk as exercise anymore. I look at it as a shared experience of the world. No matter how long or how far we go, it's an experience we share together. And the slower I do it, the more we're going to notice, and the more we're going to have time to notice and time to process, so that we can respond appropriately. So slowing down is definitely a bigger focus on slowing the humans down and letting the dogs decide whether or not they want to be part of that. And actually the what I've seen of doing that is actually, it works incredibly well. It's almost like we're that deeply connected that when our heart rates start to slow down and we start to slow down, they just tend to follow suit. Don't know if that's the best explanation there, but
it's a brilliant explanation.
It's a start point.
It's an explanation, because I think I want us to unpack a little bit more in a mo about how you structure your classes, and how you connect and engage with the caregivers, the dog owners. But I think when we think again about a kind of more traditional dog training class, which becomes quite task oriented, when we think about the parts of the brain that are now engaged with the caregiver, it's going to be very unlikely that they're connected with their dog's needs now, because you're not seeing what the dog's going through, you're seeing the task that needs to be followed through. And this thing about slowing down, you know, any sort of elevation, like nervous system elevation, will stop us from being available to the experience of another. It just does. It's very hard to kind of make ourselves available, even if we're just excited or we're really pumped up. It's just really hard. And I think it's a great skill to learn to kind of regulate down and to decompress and to be available. And I know with my clients, when they start to connect through with their dog in that way, it creates a different dynamic when they're out, when they're supporting the dog. With giving them a heavy training solution, again, it can flip into the task of doing that. Every time you see a dog, you must do this, rather than every time you see a dog, what's your dog doing? What do they need now? Just thinking along those lines. So no, I think you explained that really well, and it's important. I think you know, a lot of the thread that goes through a lot of people talking along these lines now is this notion of slowing down. You know, we've got the slow dog movement, great Facebook group, check it out. Laura Donaldson talking about cognitive reappraisal. Kathy Murphy gave a great post on puppies about giving her puppy a chance to slow down. Molly, my puppy now that we've got, I'll be showing all this stuff. That the key with Molly at the moment, especially with her catching up on a few things, is actually not doing more. It's just being amazing, giving her a chance to slow down and process. So let's think about some practical applications then.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Tell us about how you've gone about forming your new classes, about how you deal with the expectations. Because remember, the caregivers are thinking, we're going to a puppy class. So we're going to be doing lots of sit down, come stay, and lots of, come on, Rover, from the other side of the hall, or whatever, or you work outside. So just give us an idea about that, a flavour of that, and how you've gone about developing it, and what your aims are, and how you get over some of the expectations when people come in.
Okay. So, so firstly, I at the moment, Andy, I haven't been teaching the group classes. I do a lot of the one-to-ones, and Howard does the classes at the moment. And I have to give him a lot more credit for the course content right now, because he has developed that over time. But obviously, we go through and discuss that process constantly all the time. And when we do our one-to-one sessions, typically we offer a puppy pack for one-to-one, so they're getting multiple sessions as well, but just on a one-to-one basis, and it's very much teaching the same stuff. It's just more intensive because it's individual. So an example of the first class, the puppy class, and you're right, there is a lot of feedback that says at the end of the class people will say things like, it's totally not what I expected, but I absolutely loved it and it's life-changing. And I'd say that the first thing is getting the people to come in, and we'll, you know, there's chairs set out with a mat outside, there's plenty of space, and they're told to just come in and take some space and let their dog sniff, and then make their way to a chair gradually. And it's just about, you let your dog take you for a walk. Okay, you follow your dog, you just go with the dog wherever the dog needs to go, but try to give others space because it's new and they've only just met each other. And then we will sit them down, and it's about discussion, and we offer little kongs where they can put some food in, and independently leave them there, or sometimes we use large pieces of cow's ear, so that they're not dangerous for the pups to swallow, but they can have a good chow down on something for a while. And the idea is that we engage the humans and we discuss ethics and moral philosophy and understanding arousal, while the puppies just get to chill out and watch the world around them without being interfered with. We're not interested in what the puppies are doing. We just want to keep the humans away from the puppies, to let the puppies have that time, which sounds a little bit cheeky, but it's not. Really
interesting. It's really interesting and very important.
So I think there's discussion of, you know, how much force is too much force. And when you come down to kind of ethics and morals, it's going to vary on each person, and we're not there to judge or tell people, no, you shouldn't do that. We're there to open discussion and get people thinking and asking questions. And then it's the understanding arousal and how that affects behavior. In terms of further course content, we will introduce 5-meter long lines, because we very much try to help people understand development stage of puppies. And we do make reference to child development, and I know it's not identical, but there are lots of things we can correlate, and actually it can really help to sort of use analogies and references that humans can relate to in order to try and understand. Because if ultimately I don't 100% know, I can't tell you what your puppy is thinking. I can tell you what some of the neuroscience and the neurobiology can tell us about what might be happening at each stage, but also every puppy's different. You know, they all develop at different stages, but we know that we don't live in a world where we can just let them roam free. We don't. It's not safe. There's too many of us. There's roads, there's cars, everything else. So we use long lines, 5 meters, as a management tool to allow as much freedom for a young brain that needs to investigate, explore, problem solve. We can reduce the level of arousal by creating enough boundary with what we call soft skills. So we teach very soft handling skills so that we're not doing any kind of yanking or tight short leads. We just want the overall experience on a lead to be loose and soft as possible. But on the occasions where there needs to be a boundary for safety, we have that boundary available to us to keep everyone safe. So those are some of the skills we would learn. We look at moving puppies towards each other and how the behavior changes in terms of the arousal that it creates, and then the value of moving away again and what that does. And we encourage recovery from arousal. So we very much focus on how to, we do snuffle recoveries. So we scatter some food to allow the dog to put its nose down, do slow body movements in a small area rather than fast movements in a big area. So if you compare a sprint to a jog to a walk, so that we're again working with that nervous system. So something gets exciting, we get close to another pup, we have a little wiggle, say hi, we slowly, calmly move away, again teaching the body language of the owners to infer which way to go, soft handling skills so that the puppy has time to recognize the owners are moving and cueing move away, but they've still got time to process that situation. And then we promote recovery. There is a section where we cover a lot about nutrition and food and ways that you can help depending on where you live. So adding enrichment, you know, we very much promote stuff that involves using the nose. People quite like using interactive toys, so we talk about that, but again, we're very much open to choice. I'm a big advocate for gut health, so we do discuss that and how to recognize when your puppy might be reacting badly to its food. We talk about physiology and anatomy, sorry, there's a fly trying to get me, and how long-term health is about recognizing what kind of activity for the puppies, how their bodies are going to grow and develop, how to recognize anything that could be indicating problem areas. So we're kind of looking at that. How do you start and lay those foundations? We teach a version of the counting game, so Chirag Patel's counting game. I know Sarah Fisher uses it a lot, lots of people use it. We teach a version of that. I don't know if it's exactly how they do it, but we've taught it as a way, as a gauge to ask your puppy a question. In this moment, how do you feel? And according to the numbers we get, gives us information about how aroused the puppy is in that situation and how we can use the counting game if we need to bring the arousal down, or what to do next time to help the puppy set up in that environment to be less aroused if necessary. We do a fire alarm recall, which is probably different to how lots of other people do it, and it very much focuses on predatory motor pattern and trying to complete it with a cue and a signal and the body language of the owner. If you want me to go into more detail, I can. We do a little bit of, this is how you train a behavior. This is why you might use it and why you might not use it. And here's the caveat of how to be careful when you do use it. There may be some other stuff, but that's kind of the gist of what we do. And so you gain social skills, you gain a recall that's effective. You gain the knowledge and understanding that the first 6 months at least is about you keeping the pup safe, but allowing them to experience the world at a calm pace, how to help cue calmness. And when calmness isn't there because they're puppies, we help promote calmness and self-recovery, and just nurturing that development stage, really. I think that sort of encompasses most of what we teach at the moment, and a lot of it is about body language and pace.
I think it'd be good to get you back. I think I'm going to, because of our kind of relationship that we have anyway, to get you back regularly on things. And I think there's quite a few things within that setup that I think would be really useful to unpack. And maybe with some use of video and that kind of thing, if you felt was appropriate at the time. Because, but I think it's really interesting, a few things you said there, because I reference a lot about everything for me is about elevation or decompression when we think about that. For anybody who's not sure, elevation is just when that nervous system starts to kind of take over a little bit, and the chances of that kind of more rational self-regulatory process starts to become less likely until we get a bit of a decompression. And it's interesting how many things that we feel we have to train a dog to do differently, especially when they're young, are actually behaviors that are exhibited because of the elevation. So actually the problem is the elevation, because that's where the pulling, the jumping up, the being silly. And then we're kind of throwing lots of things, trying almost artificially create decompression for the dog, but in fact that nervous system probably they haven't gone through self-regulatory process. And I know, doing one-to-ones myself, I don't do classes, working with young dogs, for them to experience elevation and decompression and to experience the notion of self-regulation through their own learning is hugely important for them, isn't it? And I think and giving the caregivers enough knowledge, enough insight to know when it's safe to allow that. I think we panic way too much. Oh my God, the dog's stressed, or the dog's doing that kind of behavior, rather than just allowing it to play out a little bit sometimes. So what kind of, you've run, like I say, Howard is, he does a lot of the classes, and he's been very heavily involved in the course content for that. Maybe get Howard on sometime, that would be good as well.
Sure, he'd love to, yeah.
What's the is it pretty unanimous then that people at the end of that were, God, this has just really changed how I do things? Do you find that is the case? Do you get some people who don't get it or can't move past those initial expectations? How's it been? You've been doing this for a while now, haven't you? About a year?
We have a couple of years, I would say, actually, as the way things have kind of morphed and changed, and the exploration and research that we've done and started to try different things. We apart from a little bit with the fire alarm recall and the counting game and snuffling, we don't really use food at all. And so that's been a massive big game changer. I think a lot of the feedback we've had, and I get this a lot with the one-to-one sessions I do, because it encompasses so much of the same stuff, it's just more compact, is we've had comments where people have said, I feel calmer, I feel more relaxed. We've had people ring us up to book in because they've met other puppies and stopped the people and said, how is your puppy so calm? And just my puppy's mental and crazy and all over the place. And so there's been people kind of meeting other pups that are just coping and being calm and enjoying life and just being natural. And that's been one of the feedbacks we've had. We had a lady ask Howard if he was sensory integration trained, which is really interesting because there's a whole area there which is fascinating. We've had people who have sort of referenced that perhaps they suffer with some form of PTS or have had extreme trauma in their lives, and the understanding brain development and nervous system regulation and promoting recovery and slowing down has been, like, personally very sort of brilliant to them. And the concept of relationship, that's been the biggest thing, is that actually when we start to consider what the relationship is about, and that idea of trust and communication, and doing it slowly enough for the young brain to cope, and recognizing how busy our world is and how much it changes, I think it's just been really fascinating. People have even said they feel more mindful, or they feel that it's almost been meditative, and they've had such lovely experiences with their puppies because they just enjoy their walks and they let their puppy sniff, and they value the puppy doing less and watching and sniffing. and not doing a lot. And the social interaction's been brilliant that we've seen. We've had one or two people who really found it difficult. And I think it's because some of the analogies we've used, which perhaps are referencing child development. I think one was about the concept of guiding children with crayons and paper so that they don't draw on the walls. And the idea was that you're sort of, you're not telling them not to draw on the walls, you're just helping to show them what it is you want them to do, and you're setting up the environment so that they can succeed at that. And I think there was one lady in particular who, she just took one element of that and walked away and felt like we were saying that kids can draw all over their parents' walls. And I think that's just where they were at. And she'd obedience trained her dogs her whole life, and she was very much about dogs should walk to heel and dogs shouldn't bark, which is a whole other topic about how bark averse we all are. But on the whole, we've had great feedback. And actually, it's watching. I observed the change. One of the questions I ask my clients on a regular basis is, we do a walk and they go, oh, that was amazing. He was great. He did it. And he was fine. I'm like, wow. And I say, would you normally walk that slowly? Would you stop that often? No, we walk at this pace. We go from A to B. We've got 10 minutes. We got, and I go, can you see that that's all you're needing to do? And can you see how much your dog's brain and nervous system are working together to understand the world? And you give them that time, and it helps and it makes sense. And you cue the right stuff at the right time. And if anything, you stop micromanaging them and you just stay connected, and it helps. And I know it's hard, and not everybody lives in an environment that may have green fields nearby or have enough space, but I do believe there is always an option we can find. We just got to work with what the resources are available at that stage. And it might be tiny little things, but tiny doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
And I think a lot of the growth, a lot of the progress comes from the tiny. Actually, it's the small bits, because they're likely to be more authentic for the dog, because we've learned that little thing. It's really important, Lucy, you sharing that, because I think, I know there's going to be some trainers listening. I know I get a lot of people reach out who want to make some shifts, maybe start thinking about things, and they're scared that maybe they're going to, you're going to have people come to classes who are not going to be happy because they're not getting what they thought they were going to get. And I think it's really interesting that actually you found, as I have, I don't run classes, but my one-to-one clients, especially puppy clients, they are so into it when they're presented with this different way, because it makes a lot more sense. And I remember one lady saying to me, with her pup, we did a lot of this kind of style thing. We all do things differently, I know. But her previous dog, she'd really gone down a heavy training route. And she said, oh my God, I was just thinking back to my dog about how little I was allowing that dog to do in the environment, because I was asking the dog to heel, asking the dog to sit at the curb, wait there, do this, do that. And the whole time she was just doing cue, and all sorts of things, even just walking. The dog couldn't just walk, and all that opportunities. And then she realized that actually she'd created a big puller on the lead, because that nervous system kept spiking all the time and the dog couldn't actually process. And I think that's important, but we have to think about some of the issues that we have, especially with adolescent dogs, pulling, jumping up, all these kind of things, and how much we could avoid those if we were thinking about what we're educating in the first place for the dogs. Just a little point for people listening, Molly, if you don't know, on my private line, my husband and I fostered a little puppy called Molly. We've now decided to keep her, of course, and now that that's all official, I've got great video and great video footage and photos and that kind of thing, and I'm going to start adding these into the dog centre care group, so you'll be able to see Molly's story, how we go through a lot of these things practically, so that'll be a little window onto some of these things. Lucy, right, that's I can't believe it, the hour's gone. It's amazing, isn't it? So that's really cool. So we must get you back, because there's lots of stuff. These first chats are always important because they give people a chance to hear you. And what I really wanted to do with this next run, we've got quite a few kind of real life professionals, as I say, people who are just doing it. And I think that's important because we can all learn from that and the journeys that people have gone through. Where do you think things are going to continue on? If you could look at you and Howard now, maybe a couple of years down the line, where do you think the progression is going to come about what you're going to keep shifting with?
God, that's a good question, isn't it? I feel like we're in quite a good place, but I really want to understand further I think I like scientific backup for stuff, but I do think sometimes we put a lot of weight on science being the right thing, and I'm very much a bit of a philosopher as well. And although I think the word spiritual is misused and misrepresented a lot, I think I've got that side to me as well. And I do think we've got a very deep connection that the relationship human and dogs have. If you look at it in comparison to so many other relationships in the animal kingdom, it's quite unique. So I think that I think what I'm learning and feeling at the moment with the techniques I'm using is I'm seeing great progress in them, and where that's helping is actually supporting the humans more, to be more aware, to help them feel calmer, to recognize so much of what we do with our dogs, even down to how quickly we answer the door and are struggling with the amount that the dog barks and runs to the door, is nothing to do with the dog. It's actually because we're so worried about the person on the other side of the door and answering the door quickly enough to facilitate their needs or wants. You don't want to look rude. You can't spend ages, or they might go away. And actually, we need to recognize that a lot of our struggles and people's struggles with their dogs is about how they feel. So I think that there's an element of moving with that. And I like to always have backup. I think where we're at and what we're doing is really proving to be good and work well. I think I just want to get more in-depth knowledge. I want to really, I mentioned to you, I'm hopefully going to have a nice chat with David from All About Dog Food at some point. I'll try and convince him to come and chat to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I want to learn a lot more about nutrition and gut stuff and health. I'm looking a lot more at neurobiology. And yeah, I don't know if that really answered the question there. In terms of where we're going, I feel like I'm on a good path, but I don't feel like I'm going to stop learning, because I feel like every person and every dog and every environment that they're in and their situation is giving me new stuff. But I do feel like that these foundations I'm learning, I feel like my toolbox is kind of, there's only a few tools that I use now, and I've got quite a wide toolbox over the years, but there's a few that just are, I'm going to keep polishing them and putting them out, because they seem to be the only 3 or 4 that I need. And most of them, I don't even need to use them as such. They're more about understanding the relationship that I have. I don't know if that's helpful.
Very well.
A bit waffling.
I really value our friendship, and we've been friends for a long time, and we've gone through a lot together, haven't we?
We have, yes.
In our kind of personal lives as well as professional and stuff, and we've supported each other. But you've always been an inspiration for me, and it's always been a great place, especially some of those early conversations we had, because finding safe spaces, especially in our industry, can be difficult, right? Because you know, I look at some of the stuff on we're really good in dog-centered care, actually, in the group. I don't have to do much firefighting there, but I know in other groups somebody will post something that is pretty uncontroversial, but people will find a controversy from it. So it can be hard to find those safe spaces, and I've always appreciated ours. And I always talk about the emotional experience and what that is, because I think that's ultimately how we connect to dogs, by pursuing that more. And what's really wonderful with what you and Howard have been doing is you've really gone into that and thought, right, how do we create more connection? And we've built up a big momentum into how to change. I think this momentum is how to hear better, how to listen better, and how to be more available. And I think you and Howard are doing great work. Well, thank you so much, Lucy. I really appreciate your time today.
No, it's been my pleasure.
Just to let everybody know, we've got Liz Lott from Lott's Dogs up next in a couple of weeks' time. And then we've got Shay Kelly as well. I can't wait to speak to Shay. A couple of great ones in October. We've got some others lined up. I haven't put the events up yet, so I won't. I'll keep those as a bit of a teaser. Look out for the Molly stuff. So I'm going to start putting, it's all going to be very structured, lots of videos, big caveat, it's Molly's story, because like you said, Lucy, every dog's different. But you know, we're doing a lot of this stuff real life, real time, putting our money where our mouth is, really, with this puppy who needs a lot of support. So yeah, watch out for that. Great. Well, thanks, Lucy. And
thank
yeah,
you.
we'll speak soon. But thanks for your time today.
All right, nice to see you.